And this is where we get to the human psychology part of it, Joe. Because of the high visibility of that performance, it might be your opportunity to make a lateral move to a Kyler Murray.
We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by FanDuel. Week 3, trade targets, buy, sell, guys that we should be higher on or lower on than our opponents, and how to take advantage, honestly. But before we get there, I know over half of you guys out there watching this right now are not subscribed. I actually literally can see that in the data. So hopefully by the end of this video, that changes. While you're doing that, smash that like button. All of that good stuff truly means the world. Co-owner of Footballguys, Sigmund Bloom. Sig, how we doing?
Good. Just like every Monday, Joe, we are trying to absorb, process everything that we saw, get some sort of meaning out of it, something that's actionable while looking forward to next week, but also trying to gauge what we think other people are thinking, how that's going for them, trying to find the gap and exploit.
I'm always like interested to see where our worlds collide, Sig, where like I'm a little bit more focused on the DFS and betting side, and then you're just like feet first into the fantasy football world. But honestly, like this is the perfect segment for that to collide, because honestly, what DFS is trying to uncover guys that we think are undervalued, guys that we think have been seeing the volume but haven't quite been, I guess, under the circumstances gotten there for us in fantasy on a daily perspective. But it's basically exactly what we're doing with trades, right? It's trying to figure out which types of guys we can buy low on and which guys that we have gotten production from that we don't quite think is going to continue, right? So it definitely meshes together. Would you agree with that? This is like the perfect conversation for us to have.
Yeah, it is the same thing. And probably who you should get on your show sometime to talk, Joe, is whoever it is at the DFS companies that's responsible for setting prices.
Yeah.
Because I think that the setting of prices week to week reflects this idea of trying to find, and they're trying to find the middle, right? They're not trying to find the price where everybody's going to put a player in the lineup, or they're not trying to find the price where nobody's going to put a player in the lineup. And watching how they change prices isn't necessarily a roadmap to what to do, but it's a roadmap to where they think the perceptions are. And you can't exploit the inefficiencies in the market if you don't understand the perceptions of the market. This is where, I mean, this is like one of the only times you're going to hear me say this. Like, spend a little time on social media, like see what people are saying on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. See how people are reacting, because it can get you a little bit ahead of the curve. But it's a fun, silly game we play. And anytime you have human psychology, and after spending some time in the real estate market, I can say it's unpredictable.
Yeah, it's crazy because I still even remember, either it wasn't last year, it was the year before, they finally started to put these elite running backs over 10K. And just like that, like mentally was so hard for people to like get over. And like they basically were like playing chicken with us. Like at what point is Christian McCaffrey not going to be 40% owned? Like if we continue to move his price up, what was that kind of threshold? So it's always interesting with the pricing. I'm sure it's an algorithm or something at this point, but I think a lot of it probably still has to do with ownership. So super interesting. One thing I'm happy about, Sig, is that my Cardinals look pretty good to start the year. I'm pretty happy about that. But one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about specifically was James Conner. Like, what do we do with this guy? Is he someone that we should be bullish on going forward? Like this offense, it seems like there's just so much to go around at this point. But James Conner is still one that just feels risky week in and week out. But I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts on him.
Well, he's risky, but there's a reward to go with that risk. And what we do like, as you said, is this offense is going to be in the 30s most weeks. And that's a good thing, because some of those touchdowns are going to go to James Conner eventually. It clearly has the role as the finisher from week 1. He had a run down to the 2-yard line in week 1. Kyler Murray is just so good at finishing these drives that he may not get as many opportunities, but it is going to come. And I think that they're happy with I think that, as say the Buffalo Bills discovered last year, you can't just get by on your quarterback. You have to force the defense to honor the run. That's where James Conner also comes in. I think that they're going to eventually reward him one of these weeks. This is what you want to hear for DFS. One of these weeks where the going is easy, I think they're going to reward him with a couple of short touchdowns. I think that's something that makes sense for them, and I think that there's nothing that we've seen from him that suggests that he can't do that. How about this week against Jacksonville? That sure sounds like a game that he's going to get over 20 carries. That sure sounds like a game that he can get multiple scoring opportunities. So, Joe, without even meaning to, I'm just illustrating what you're talking about how these things intersect. Because the perfect time to trade for a player is right before that blow-up week. The perfect time to load up in your lineups is right before that blow-up week. Based on Jacksonville rolling over 2 weeks in a row, this could be the James Conner week.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. So he is $5,300 on FanDuel. So he is extremely cheap. He hasn't had a target yet in 2 weeks. But I mean, if we're just kind of adding together, I guess, some of his rush attempts, like he's still getting reasonable volume in a very good offense. So if it is a situation where they're way ahead and he ends up popping in a couple from the goal line, I think it's definitely one, especially on FanDuel, where touchdowns are just so important that we should be monitoring. Do you think that he is going to end up getting any of this passing game work? I struggle just sometimes with these running backs with like
Yeah.
extremely mobile quarterbacks that they just don't really need to check it down as much. And no, obviously Chase Edmonds is there kind of with that role. Like, do we think Connor can grab even a little bit of that market share? Or is that not something we're really going to have him for?
Hey, it's more like Nick Chubb. We're not really going to
Okay.
have him for that, but he's capable in the passing game. We know that, and it's one of those things where it's just a gravy if we can get anything from the passing game. But we saw Kenyon Drake in a less viable Arizona offense last year get into double digits in rushing touchdowns, and that was with Chase Edmonds still having a pretty decent sized role in the backfield, even though Edmonds' role has grown. So you have to think the touchdowns are going to come from Connor sooner or later, and the easiest matchups are the most likely place they're going to come from.
Let's move on to AJ Brown. This is a guy that he has been seeing the volume, say like 17 targets over 2 weeks. Like he still has almost 40% of the team's market share of air yards. So like, I guess it's just kind of, what do you think about this Tennessee offense? We know what Derrick Henry's going to bring. Talk about a guy that normally doesn't give us targets, but man, 10 targets through 2 games for Derrick Henry, that's got to be a win.
Yeah.
But what do we think about AJ Brown?
What I like about AJ Brown is he's willing to joke about his problems with drops on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going up against Indy in the AFC South Showdown. I feel pretty confident that 1 out of Tennessee and Indy are going to win that division, Joe. And what have we seen from Indy so far? Xavier Rhodes has been out. I don't know if it would make that much of a difference. Tyler Lockett was running free in week 1, Cooper Kupp last week. It just could be a get right week for AJ Brown. There's going to be that the rubber band's going to snap back in. We saw it for Julio Jones this week. I just think AJ Brown is one of those players that's too good to hold down. So again, whether it's DFS, where his ownership might be down a little bit, or getting a trade in a redraft league, not going to get him in dynasty leagues, then this is a moment just to do a price check and see where we're at.
Yeah, just for a little bit of context, he's priced around guys like Marquise Brown, Antonio Brown. So like he's not really that expensive.
No.
He's 6,800 on FanDuel this week. So like I think that he's still a decent buy low candidate. Like he's still, I mean, he's basically the same price as Julio at this point, which is kind of interesting. So I'm on board with that one against Indy in this spot. It is in Tennessee, so the price is something that I think people are going to be talking about for sure. Let's spend a little bit more time on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, though, Sig, because this was a game in prime time that I really enjoyed watching for sure. It's nice when some of those games are in prime time, but you can see it in Lamar Jackson's face. Like they finally beat Mahomes, they finally beat the Chiefs, and he was a big part of it, obviously. But that just had to have been like even just mentally, like getting over, like yes, we can beat this team, right? That had to have been huge for a guy like Lamar.
It is, and it's great for this Ravens team. If they hadn't blown the game against the Raiders, instead of the Raiders being the 2-0 darling, the Ravens would be the 2-0 darling. But either way, it feels like the AFC is wide open. It feels like there's not that Kansas City doesn't look like that dominant team, whether it's the way the Browns played them or the way the Ravens played. We'll see Kansas City play the Chargers this week as an aside. But from a fantasy standpoint, I'm a little worried about Lamar Jackson, and maybe with Detroit up next week, this isn't a sell high take. Although it still could be a sell high take this week because things could be so easy for Baltimore next week that Jackson is on the sidelines before the third quarter is over, or it's a week whenever Tyson Williams scores and Latavius Murray scores and Devontae Freeman scores or something like that. The problem I have right now with Lamar Jackson, and it was stirring, it was one of the most stirring individual performances we see in any season, and I don't want to. I want to bask in the glow of that as long as I can, but he just can't put the whole offense on his shoulders and hold up. He can't put these kinds of performances together week after week after week and hold up. The NFL is just too brutal. And I love the fact that he has no regard for his health. He has no regard for his own well-being. He just wants to win. But that is something that is going to catch up with him eventually. I mean, odds are, because a quarterback, it's one thing for a quarterback to be a runner like Kyler Murray, but how often do you ever see Kyler Murray take a hit or a clean hit? Lamar Jackson just leaves himself open to that so often that I'm worried about it. It was a big national TV performance. It was a big performance that put fantasy teams over the top, DFS lineups where it was crucial whether you got as many points as possible out of him. So because of that visibility, and this is where we get to the human psychology part of it, Joe, because of the high visibility of that performance, it might be your opportunity to make a lateral move to a Kyler Murray. Or I'm not even sure who you would make the lateral move to at this point because we're a little worried about Dak. Mahomes was okay, but it was more of his teammates making plays for him. Josh Allen.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe you might want to do something like cash out Lamar Jackson down to Tom Brady, depending on your scoring system. All I'm trying to say is this is an opportunity to get out of Lamar Jackson if he continues to put this workload on his own shoulders every week. Eventually, his body will fail under it.
Yeah, there's a lot here, and you said it, like, probably good news from like a real life perspective, like them winning that game, but also like you said, he was literally like dropping his shoulder into hits just to like make a point in some way. He's not big enough to do that, Sig. So like there's one of the, like, we don't like seeing that from our quarterbacks, and like you said, also like the high visibility of this game, he would be a guy that would be a little bit easier to trade, I would imagine, right now after he did that in prime time. If you can make that lateral move, if you can get like if you add another piece and you can get the Josh Allen, that's something that I would absolutely be doing and getting out from underneath those Lamar shares. And if they're a team that's going to be ahead enough to where like the volume, and we know we want efficiency, but the volume's never going to be sky high for Lamar in a lot of these contests anyway. So there's enough concerns to where he makes a reasonable sell in a spot like this after what he just did. So I'm with you. Let's move on. Kenny Golladay. Sig, I have no idea what to do with some of these Giants at this point. It just looks so bad in a lot of ways. I know that Danny Dimes got there from a fantasy perspective, but it's never pretty. And Kenny Golladay just really, I mean, what is he? Is he the third, fourth option at this point in this offense? Like, it's not great.
Right. It's not great. It's not great. And again, it was a highly visible Thursday night game, which feels like months ago because of the way the NFL calendar goes. But what's the lasting image from that game, Joe? It's Daniel Jones and Kenny Golladay on the sidelines, right? And I don't know how Joe Judge is going to run his team, and I'm not going to expect to know what he's going to do about this. But here's the good news. It's Atlanta up this week. If you want to mend quarterback, right? If you want to mend quarterback wide receiver chemistry, what did we see for Philadelphia? Jalen Hurts, everything looks easy. Everything comes easy to him in this passing game. Jalen Reagor gets a touchdown. Devontae Smith gets a touchdown, And then he faces San Francisco the next week, and except for that 91-yard bomb to Quez Watkins, nothing comes easy, right? What did we see yesterday, Tampa Bay? 2 touchdowns for Mike Evans. And wasn't that a get-right spot for Evans after week 1? Let's go ahead and feed Evans to show him he's still a big part of it. Godwin still gets a touchdown, even though Gronk got 2 touchdowns. It is going to be there against the Atlanta secondary. It sure makes a lot of sense for the Giants to have at the top of the list get some good vibes between Jones and Golladay, which could be good vibes for DFS lineups, and time to get that trade in if you believe in Golladay.
Yeah, just the targets have not necessarily been there, and they have not been on the same page. So I'm with you. I guess as a little bit of a bonus before we get out of here, Sig, what are we doing with Saquon Barkley at this point? Like, he looked pretty good at times.
Yeah.
This team is just not going to be very good. The offensive line, it's all the, excuses that we had and why he kind of fell out of the middle of the first round most of the summer. What do we do with him, Saquon, now? He looks like he's getting healthier, but this team's still not going to be very good. It's the same story.
It's true. You got to hold her by, though, because I think the perceived value, if you're selling low now, you're probably selling even below the actual value, because the perceived value, again, it's the national audience. He did get free once against Washington, and you have to think the Giants went in knowing that they were going to have a Thursday night game in week 2, and they weren't going to be able to push Barkley too hard on that first Sunday or that Thursday. Again, it's Atlanta. It's a defense that is a red carpet. Can we trademark that? Let's start calling the Atlanta defense the red carpet, because I just think that everyone's going to get going against them. I know Leonard Fournette, he looked pretty good, but he didn't get a touchdown last week. But the point is that I think you have to hold Barkley. If you want to deal him, you have to wait for something that gets everybody back in on him before you deal him. And I also think that the reality, Joe, is that contemplating this before the season, this really didn't go that differently than how you would envisioned it. So nothing is really wrong with the Barkley situation, but the feeling that there is what makes it really hard to trade him right now.
How about this, Sig? We talked about the pricing before of one of these like wide receivers that seemed out of whack. How about Saquon Barkley is $100 more expensive than Cordero Patterson. He is the same price as Melvin Gordon. He's $100 cheaper than guys like Damian Harris and Antonio Gibson. Man, $6K Saquon Barkley. Like we talked about the pricing and like how cheap are they going to have to make them in a good spot for us to just completely go all in. I don't know, man. $6K, that seems like a decent spot to take a shot on Saquon. Let me know in the comments the guy that you are trading for and one guy that you are selling going into week 3. Very curious what your guys' thoughts are. Toss a like on this video. All that good stuff.